Herb. Herb is a plant. I mean, herbs are good for everything. Herb.
Welcome to Eugene Cannabis TV. You made the trip. You got DanK here, your host, and a co-host. I should say a co-host DanK and another co-host Eric. Eric is with
Medicinal Horizons. .com, medicinalhorizons.com.
.com, yeah, very important. Get the right dot deal there. Okay, so appreciate you coming in.
Absolutely.
We got some things to talk about, news stories. The first thing I want to jump off and mention briefly, this is actually happening as we speak, but we still thought we'd bring it up. The National Cannabis Industry Association is hosting education and networking events. They hosted one in Seattle on September 25th, and then the one in Portland is actually happening today, which is September 30th. And what they are is the National Cannabis Industry Association's membership is comprised of the leading business and organizations in America's emerging cannabis industry. As the only national trade association for cannabis professionals, NCIA works to defend and advance the industry on the national stage. The mission of the National Cannabis Industry Association is to promote the growth of a responsible and legitimate cannabis industry in the industry, and to work for a favorable social, economic, and legal environment for that industry in the United States. So it's interesting that we're looking forward to looking into being legal here in Oregon, and this is one of the steps. It's the network. The events are a networking opportunity for interested parties within the state marijuana industry who wish to meet NCI Executive Director Aaron Smith and other members within the state, potentially join the organization themselves and learn more about the organization's activities both at the state and national level. So our friends Joseph and Chelsea are
Joseph and
there.
Chelsea from the Greener Side are up there, yeah. And one of the things that is really good about this is also going to help lay the framework for what the legalization is going to look like and how it's going to be implemented. And one of the good things about having the NCIA is that they're going to educate, and what people are going up there for is to learn, how this is going to look and how it's going to work. Because one of the things that's really important about this is making sure that when this is legalized, well, it's been legalized in Washington and Colorado, but as this starts being legalized in other states, we have a solid framework for how this legalization is going to work. And this is really good that they're coming to Portland and going to be able to go up there and attend. So. Really nice.
You're right. And so they'll be back in the next week or two and tell us about it. So we'll have an inside report on it.
Absolutely.
So that'll be great. And the other exciting news is that the two legalization initiatives are finally, we've been talking about them, well, they are actually hit the street, so to speak. We have the text right here, and we have the petitions, both electronic and the hard copies. You can send us an email if you like to gather signatures for that initiative. Weather permitting, we're going to have the Saturday Market booth down across from Saturday Market, our cannabis information booth there. People can come in and borrow clipboards, pens, and whatever you need to go out and gather signatures. What we need is people to go out into the Saturday Market area. The booth is great, but John Q. Public generally doesn't come onto the Freedom Plaza, so we need people to go out into the market and actually work with the petition. And so anyway, that's coming on. And so two measures. It's Measure 21. It's the amendment. It amends the Constitution, permits adult use, possession, production, except actions endangering children, public safety, the state may regulate. A vote, result of the yes, it amends the Constitution, permits private personal use, possession or production of cannabis by adults. Anyway, so that's the amendment. The drawback for an amendment is it takes more votes to get it on the ballot. But the advantage of the amendment is the legislature can't mess with it.
Exactly, and that's one of the things why I think it's important to get it legalized. Amending the Constitution to legalize it would be, I believe, the very best step that you could take. One of the things, I know we tried this before, there was a lot of parts of the last one, which was Measure 80, that a lot of people had problems with. One of them was that there was no limits on the amount that a person could cultivate. It's just very important that we really, obviously I'm a marijuana activist, cannabis activist, so I'm very biased in this measure. One of the things that I try to argue to people is who don't use marijuana, why it's important that we get this passed. And I'm not going to sit here and I'm not going to, waste mine and your time on all the benefits of medical. I mean, that's what I do for my consulting, is just talk to people about the benefits of consulting. The one thing I would always argue is that how this came to be legalized or criminalized in the first place. One of the things I've always said is when you look back into the reasons as to why marijuana was made a criminal in the first place, they weren't for any sound reasons. They were not for public safety. They were not for, they weren't even to help prosper with the economy. It actually went in reverse. A lot of people in a lot of industries were wiped out, especially in the pharmacy industry. However, quite expectedly, other companies emerged very wealthy when cannabis was made illegal, back in the 30s with the Marijuana Tax Stamp Act. And so one of the things that I always tell people when it comes to legalizing marijuana, why should I vote for something that I don't use? This is costing us so much money in incarcerations, so much money in imprisonment, and so much money in fines. This isn't about whether you do it or not. This is actually about, there are certain things, it's like cleaning the closet. We have a lot of laws and a lot of things in our judicial system and our legal system that just don't apply anymore. They just don't work. They never applied to begin with. This is one of them. And this is a way that we can just start moving forward, kind of cleaning out our closet from our past, from things that we didn't get right in past generations. It's time to make up for those and get those things right now. And that's what I believe, why people should vote for the legalization in Measure 21.
Right. And then there's Measure 22. Measure 22 is a standard referendum initiative. Actually, it's the revised measure from last election cycle. There was a lot of complaints, and they made a lot of changes as per criticisms, trying to make it more acceptable. And so that's Measure 22, the Oregon Cannabis Taxation Act. So we have both initiatives, and again, you can get a hold of dankbagman@hotmail.com and let you know how to get a copy of that, or if you want to sign it yourself, or better yet, if you'd like to get some blank sheets and gather signatures, so we can line you up on that too. But we've got right at 9 months until July 3rd is the deadline for getting the initiatives in to be on the 2014 ballot in November. So that's just right at 9 months. Just 9 months and a couple of days. So
and it comes quick.
Yes, it does. And the bad thing is that they fiddled around, and just now got going, and now we only got 9 months to go, and we're right in the dead of winter. Now we're starting into winter. We lost the prime summertime time to gather signatures. But anyway, made it last time, and so another thing. This is hot news that you won't get anywhere else. They've hired 5 paid petitioners, so the paid petition part has started, and right now they got 5 of them on the street. So as they get more money coming in, they'll be putting more of them on the street.
Nice.
So so anyway, that's some of that news. Like I said, you won't hear anywhere else. So so let's anyway. Now we're moving on, and this is in Hawaii. This is an ongoing deal here in Hawaii. Pot minister pleads guilty, plans appeal. Are you familiar with Roger Christie? Have you heard of him before?
I've heard of him before, absolutely,
Yeah, Robert Christie has been a long-time activist in Hawaii. This is out of Honolulu. The founder of an organization that openly promotes marijuana use pleaded guilty on Friday in federal court to possessing nearly 300 pot plants as part of a distribution ring, but reserved the right to appeal his case on religious grounds. Roger Christie of Hilo entered the plea to 1 count of conspiring to manufacture, distribute, and possess marijuana plants. This count carries a minimum sentence of 5 years and a maximum of 40 years in prison. He also pleaded guilty to 2 counts of failing to file a tax return. Sentencing was scheduled for January 22nd. Prosecutors agreed to drop other drug charges. Christie, 64, who founded the Hawaiian Cannabis Ministry, will forfeit his apartment and more than $21,000 discovered by federal agents during their investigation determined he had 284 plants. Excuse me. So yeah. Anyway, he decided to plead guilty, and let's see. Yeah.
You know what? This is something that's been going on for a while, not just in Hawaii, but all over the country. People have always used the religious grounds defense for cannabis, and one of the things is for many religions, it's a sacrament. It's something that they hold sacred, and it's something that they use in ceremonies and rituals. In this case, when you read this, he had to plead guilty to 2 counts of failing to file a tax return. He had to forfeit an apartment. This wasn't like they were raiding some drug dealer's house, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
He had to forfeit his apartment and determine more than $21,000 discovered by federal agents, and that he had 284 plants. $21,000, this is a 60, how old was he? 64 years old?
Mm-hmm.
I know a lot of, $21,000, that's what, people would have in their savings with their cars, maybe money they have tied up in equity on their homes. It's just funny when they say $21,000, it doesn't say cash, it just says $21,000 discovered. Tax returns, a little bit of cash, he loses his apartment. This is one of the things that I see as just a huge waste of resources. I'm sure in Hawaii they have bigger criminals and bigger threats than Roger Christie and his wife, who are passing along the cannabis word through their religious beliefs. And this is something that the law enforcement decides to target. And this is one of my biggest arguments and biggest complaints, is that the law enforcement always seems to go after the easiest targets. And we don't need you to do that. While we do need law enforcement, we don't need you to go after the easy targets. We need you to go after the people that are dangerous, that are a threat to our children, that are a threat to our way of life. And people like Roger Christie and the Hawaii Cannabis Ministry are not a threat. And it's just a shame that I bet you they wasted well more than $21,000 investigating this guy. Mm-hmm. And, that's what they come out of this, is they take 2 people, a husband and a wife, off the streets, while I'm pretty sure the cartels and the criminal element in Hawaii is still getting by pretty well, without the cops intervening.
Right, yeah. So he's been arguing this on religious grounds for years, and we wish him luck with that.
Absolutely.
64 years old. He's almost as old as me, old fart. So that's, we definitely wish him the best. And then this was interesting. I came across this out of News Southern Oklahoma. Oklahoma evangelical Christians are among supporters of medical marijuana. The topic of medical marijuana, or decriminalizing marijuana, hasn't garnered much attention at the state legislature. But Senator Connie Johnson, Democrat, Oklahoma City, has written legislation attempting to change Oklahoma's marijuana law. So we talk about that more on the second segment. So we got to bring this and tune in, and we'll be right back. So,
do you suffer from fear of losing your election? Are you terrified that voters will discover you've done nothing to improve their lives? Maybe it's time you talk to your spin doctor about Incarcerex. In clinical trials, Incarcerex has been shown effective at reducing election-related anxieties by making voters think you're doing something about the drug problem. It's simplistic and fast-acting. If your problems continue or get worse, you can always double or triple your dose of Incarcerex. Whether it's addiction, therapeutic use, or just casual use, there's an Incarcerex plan for every American. Best of all, taxpayers, not you, will foot the bill. So talk to your spin doctor about Incarcerex today. Common side effects include loss of civil liberties, police corruption, racial injustice, increased terrorism, threat of HIV and AIDS, and violent crime. Bloated prisons are also a common side effect. Stop taking Incarcerex if bloating lasts longer than 20 years. If you're trying to balance the budget, keep families together, or protect human rights, Incarcerex may not be right for you. Do not mix Incarcerex with the Constitution or common sense. So start taking Incarcerex and keep pretending you're doing something about the drug problem.
We Yeah, we're back, just like a bad debt. You got Eric here, and you got DanK on this side, and we were talking about Oklahoma before we were rudely interrupted by that break in the show.
Yeah.
Oklahoma evangelical Christians among supporters of medical marijuana. So they ran a poll, and I got ahead of myself here. This Senator Johnson, a Democrat, has written legislation to change the laws. She recently requested an interim study on status of policies in Oklahoma regarding marijuana use, possession, and punishment. That interim study request motivated Norma Sapp, the state director of Oklahoma NORML, to do some research. During our recent interview, Sapp told me that Oklahoma NORML, a legalization advocacy group, wanted to find out who would support various marijuana law changes. To gather data, Oklahoma NORML used donations from supporters to pay Sooner poll to ask Oklahoma residents about their feelings on marijuana. The Sooner poll posted their findings this week. According to the latest Sooner poll results, Oklahomans are ready to consider marijuana for medicinal purposes and decriminalization. The poll had support for medical marijuana at 71% and support for decriminalization at 57%. The poll did not ask about legalization. When considering arrest for a marijuana offense, nearly 2/3 of respondents, 64%, said they would be should be treated instead of jailed. Under current Oklahoma law, possession of any amount can earn one up to a year in jail for a first offense and from 2 to 10 years for a second offense. Marijuana sales of any amount can earn a sentence of up to life in prison. And Oklahoma's the one that I can't forgotten his name, but Foster.
Yes.
I've forgotten his full name, but his last name is Foster. He was sentenced, he had a life sentence at one point, and he had, I think, like 61 plants in his basement and got busted. And he had sentenced to life at one point. And I remember that during the same time, I read somewhere that during that same time there was a case in Oklahoma where a son beat his father to death with a baseball bat, and he got like 7 years.
You know, I lived in the South. When I was stationed in the military, I was stationed in Georgia. And right when I got out, I stayed in the South. I lived in Alabama. I lived in Florida before I moved back West Coast. And I can remember when I was in Alabama, a friend of mine had gotten arrested. He had just left my house, and he'd gotten arrested outside. He was playing his music really loud before he left. He got pulled over before he even left my neighborhood. A cop was coming in, stopped him, and pulled him over for loud music. And then I found out that he got arrested for marijuana possession. Well, I was mad because he had come over and told me he didn't have any. So just to make it, I was upset when I heard about this. Well, what I found out happened was he didn't have any actual marijuana on him. The cops had found some shake on the floorboard of his car. And when I had asked the officer, hey, I'm from California, what are the laws here? And he told me in Alabama it was anything that is testable, positive for marijuana, is grounds for marijuana possession. When I read this, they say that in Oklahoma, right now, it's up to a 1 year in jail for a first offense, and from 2 to 10 years for a second offense. Marijuana sales of any amount can earn a sentence of up to life in prison. While these may sound absurd, and they are, there's really a good reason for this. And I'm going to bring something up that I read today in the news. In New York City, I just read this today, it costs the same in New York City to incarcerate an inmate for 1 year as it would to attend an Ivy League school for 4 years. So to wrap that around your head, you could go to Columbia, to Yale for 4 years, and for the same amount of money, you can spend a year in the New York prison system. And people got to realize, well, spending that much money is absurd. It's not absurd when you're on the other end of it making that much money. And that's the problem where a lot of these laws lie. When you go to Oklahoma, there's a lot of private prisons in the Midwest, especially in Texas. Those private prisons aren't going to fill themselves. And a lot of the drug laws are based around this industry. That is one of the most profitable industries you can ever get into. If you have a lot of money and you want to get a very good return on that money, build a prison, build a private prison. You will be wealthy in no time. And the problem is that these prisons are being filled in these states with people like this. And like you said about the story about how a guy in Oklahoma had beaten his father to death with a bat and he received 7 years. There are states in this country where you would get more time for marijuana possession than for raping a human being. There are states in this country where you would get more time for selling a $20 bag of pot than for beating a person with your bare hands. And especially, I like this one. This one's my favorite. In all 50 states, you can get drunk, kill a person with your car, and you're still not going to get nearly as much time if you were growing 100 plants on your property. This is the things that bother me with people that need to wake up. You don't have to be involved in this. You don't have to smoke marijuana to understand this. But when you see statistics like this, 2 to 10 years for a second offense, I mean, that's like saying if you have a joint in your pocket, you go to jail for a year. If they catch you again with a joint in your pocket, you're going to jail for 2 to 10 years. And like they said, in New York, that's how much it costs to house an inmate. And that's not even the most expensive in the country. In Los Angeles, it's almost $200,000 a year, and that's still not the most expensive. People getting locked up is not for our safety anymore, and that's the sad reality. It's a business. They're making money off of putting people in jail, and that's what has to stop. And that's what these measures are about, is stop putting people in jail for ridiculous reasons.
Yeah. It says about 34% of residents who were polled who identify as evangelical Christians said they strongly support allowing seriously ill patients to use marijuana for medicinal purposes with a physician's recommendation. Another 26% of evangelical Christians said they somewhat support the notion. When you combine that, 60% of evangelical Christians in Oklahoma polled are saying they support some version of legal medical marijuana use for people who are really sick.
And I can tell you one thing too, Oklahoma is very similar to a lot of Midwestern states. They've got a bad meth problem. They've got a bad prescription pill problem. And I think that a lot of these people are starting to wake up to the realities of what constitutes a real problem, what constitutes a real public threat. And for years, they've seen people go to jail for marijuana. They've seen, people go to jail for things, and then they've seen what the meth epidemic has done. Now, granted, people do go to jail in these states for meth. And matter of fact, some of these states have very serious penalties for people who possess meth and use meth. And that's what it should be. It's a very dangerous drug, and it's been proven. There is no argument. There's nobody, arguing that meth should be legalized. There's no national organization for the reform of meth laws, nor will there ever be, because it's just not one of those types of things. No one's going to ever support that. And a lot of these states are starting to realize that we have bigger problems, and when you see the budget crisis that a lot of people are facing, they're wondering, why are we still spending all this money on people whose only crime is that they possess this thing, other than they're not harming anybody? And that's the problem with every marijuana laws. It's only a crime because you have it on you. It's not a crime because you're doing something wrong. And that's why I have a problem with it.
Right. Yeah, that's what in fact, I was told that it's not illegal to smoke it, it's illegal to possess it.
Yeah. And if you're a president, as long as you don't inhale, you're pretty good.
Yeah, it says that not every age category agreed on decriminalization. About 49% of 25 to 35-year-olds were supportive of decriminalization of up to 1 ounce, as were 49% of 55 to 69 or 64-year-olds, and about 48% of 18 to 24-year-olds said they would support decriminalizing that amount. But there were dips in support from the 35 to 44 age group, 36.3%, 45 to 54 age group, 32.9%, and residents 65 and older at 24.2%. It really drops off when you get up to older.
It does, and that's not surprising because a lot of those people were still around, and either they were old enough to be around the Reefer Madness era, or they were raised by parents who were born and taught during the Reefer Madness era. And that's hard to shake, when they had segregation laws passed. People who were born before that and were raised that way, they had a very hard time getting that out of their head. No matter how wrong it was, that's how they were raised. And, we're seeing the same problems with the stigma attached to marijuana is, when you're told your whole life that this substance will make people want to come out and kill you, or if you use it, you'll jump out the window. I mean, that's a scary thought. Yeah, that would definitely leave an imprint, And so,
yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's excuse me. Yeah, it's interesting how the support drops off on age, and yet I also at the same time have met a lot of older people that really are supportive of it,
Yeah.
And so it can vary a lot on age groups. Yeah, this is interesting. In Oklahoma, like I said, we were talking about the life sentence for Mr. Foster, and so it's always interesting to see some possible improvement coming around. So anyway, we've got just about out of the show tonight. We'll speak real quickly on, this is the Regis, the 6-month-old taken from parents who grow and use medical marijuana. We've heard this before, and it's just tragic.
Again, it's another case of priorities. I've personally seen instances of people I know who have had to call Child Protective Services on legitimate problems, and how hard it is for them to convince them that there's something wrong. It's incredible that all you have to do is say, well, I think there's pot in that house, and they come with guns blazing. They've got the police with them. If you tell them that I think this child's being abused, I think they're hitting them, you have to pretty much go down there with videotaped evidence before sometimes CPS will even do anything. And it's sad that they just use this as the way to go. And these parents both had state-issued medical marijuana cards and were all in compliance. And what I heard was, after reading this, it was the ex of the wife, it was the father of the children, who basically was a revenge issue.
Yeah.
It says it's a shame.
Yeah, and I see this all the time where people, for instance, not related to marijuana, but the same principle. When I lived in Springfield, I had a code enforcement officer. It was on me all the time, and it was from a neighbor. Okay, we've got to wrap it up, and we got to get...
If you're an adult who enjoys a good beer, there's a similar product you might want to know about. One without all the calories and serious health problems. Less toxic so it doesn't cause hangovers or overdose deaths, and it's not linked to violence or reckless behavior. Marijuana, less harmful than alcohol, and time to treat it that way. For more information, visit marijuanaissafer.org.